I think that for me, I don't think there's a debate. I think Kendrick's albums are better than Drake's.
Let me put you on game.
First up is our guy Aubrey Graham. He recently won Billboard's Top Artist of the Decade, and he's being followed by Taylor Swift, Bruno Mars, Rihanna, and Adele in that order. And I wanted to talk about Drake because Drake currently has the most tracks in the top 10 of the Hot 100 Songs chart. He made his first appearance on the Billboard charts in 2009, and he scored 9 number ones, beginning with his 2010 debut, Thank Me Later. And he's gone all the way through 2019 with the Care Package. And he also holds a record for most Hot 100 top 10s at 45 and most overall entries on the top Billboard charts with 232, which is bananas. But I just wanted to get your take on it. Is Drake the artist of the decade?
I mean, unequivocally, yeah. What is there to debate? You can debate his style, you can debate his bars sometimes, you can debate controversies, but even when all of that is put together, this man just makes hits. He's constantly on the radio, he constantly has compelling beats. He features himself with the best of the best across the board when it comes to artistry. And he just puts out hit after hit. You cannot like Drake is always in the conversation, man. Every year, I looked on the top stream songs of all time, and Drake has he's featured in every year of the decade. And so it's like, if you're gonna say the best artist of the decade, every year he has a song that's a top song, or he's featured on a song that's a top song, you know. And what more can you do? Well, he's the epitome of like the 2010 decade. You know what I mean? So you got to give him his flowers. He's the sixth god. He's OVO. He is Mr. Drake, Jimmy with the wheelchair, Graham.
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, you know me, like I always have a caveat. I definitely agree that he is the top artist of the decade for sure. I think it's undeniable. He charts every time he puts anything out, and then I mean, they used to call it the Drake stimulus package because his features are, taking artists from one tax bracket to another, essentially.
Yeah.
So his influence and popularity is undeniable. I just saw a lot of people conflating top and best when they're talking about artists of the decade. And I think that Drake unequivocally is the top artist of the decade if you start looking at the list of who's following him, whether you're talking about Taylor Swift, Bruno Mars, Rihanna, and Adele. Those are all like the top selling artists of the decade. But I think when you talk about best, that's kind of where you get into subjectiveness, because music is one of the most subjective mediums out there. And then you also get into talking about the quality of someone's work. And for me, I think that Drake is a force of nature when it comes to singles and when it comes to hits. And I think he's had a handful of good albums, but I think there's other artists, even in hip hop, that you could argue have better discographies in the 2010s or in recent memory. So I think when you talk about best artists of the 2010s, I think that that's debatable. But I think Drake is unequivocally the top artist of the 2010s.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair distinction. There's artists who are literally right behind him or a couple spots behind him who I probably enjoy their art more in terms of like the quality of their art or what they bring to the table or the sounds that they're able to provide. I was surprised to see on this same list how low Beyonce ranked in terms of like her artistry and her ranking. I think she was in like 30. I was like, what? But nonetheless, it the best artists of the decade. I mean, that'd be an interesting conversation to have. Who do you have as the best artist of the decade?
I mean, that's tough. I didn't even think about it, contextualizing it in terms of the best artist overall, because that's such a huge conversation. But best hip hop artist of the decade, uh, my vote is Kendrick. To be perfectly honest, I think that his discography is better. He has less music because Drake and many other artists typically turn out an album every year or every 2 years. But I think that for me, I don't think there's a debate. I think Kendrick's albums are better than Drake's
Mm.
from front to back, to be perfectly honest. I think his only so-so or maybe debatable album is probably Damn, but outside of that, I think that every single album is critically acclaimed. I think Kendrick is more of a critical darling, and I think that Drake is more of a hits darling, a popularity darling. Even though I do like some of his albums, but I think that Kendrick is uh better at making albums for me personally. What
Mm.
about you?
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean Kendrick, he rounds out my best out artist as well. I've enjoyed his artwork over the last 10 years about as much as anyone else. I think J. Cole is up there, obviously. I think his
Yeah.
impact on the culture. I've really enjoyed J. Cole's music as well. But yeah, Kendrick really just for me takes the top spot. Bruno Mars is also up there though. Well, no, we're talking about hip hop. Yeah, no, it has to be Kendrick, J. Cole, Drake. They are the ones that have kind of owned this decade and have been like the three-headed monster when it comes to hip hop and hip hop impact.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can probably save it for a later podcast. But um yeah, I
And
think
Kanye's
the
up there too, low key.
low key, but I think that Kanye is more of a 2000s than a 2010s
I mean,
guy.
My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is right on the cusp, so
It's right
it's
on the
kind
cusp,
of.
but after that, it's like there's not that many. I think I like the Like for Pablo, but outside of that, there's not that many albums from Kanye that I would put like as best of the decade for me
Mm,
personally. But I
gotcha.
think that's definitely a conversation. Probably have to save it for a later pod. If you're listening, yeah, just shoot us an email. Let us know what your top artists or top artists are of the decade. And if you're watching on YouTube, just hit us in the comments. Let us know what your top artists are. Did we get it right? Are we on that BS? Just let us know.